The Nuclear Mystery of Nanda Devi, a Cold War Tale. In the shadow of the towering Nanda Devi, India's second highest peak, lies one of the Cold War's most intriguing mysteries, a story of international espionage, nuclear surveillance, and an unsolved disappearance that continues to haunt the Himalayas to this day. The Cold War context, 1954 to 1964. The year was 1954, and the world was caught in the icy grip of the Cold War. The United States, determined to maintain its geopolitical dominance, watched with growing concern as Communist China expanded its influence across Asia. Meanwhile, India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, was attempting to navigate a delicate balance, trying to maintain friendly relations with China despite growing tensions. Everything changed in 1964. China successfully conducted its first nuclear test in Xinjiang province, sending shockwaves through the international community. The Pentagon and the United States Department of Defense were particularly alarmed by China's rapid nuclear advancement and its potential threat to global security. Both India and America found themselves sharing a common concern about China's growing nuclear capabilities. The genesis of Operation Hat. In response to this new threat, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency devised an ambitious plan. They would collaborate with India's Intelligence Bureau, IB, to monitor China's nuclear activities. The plan called for the installation of a sophisticated listening device near the Indo-Tibetan border, one that could intercept and analyze radio signals from Chinese nuclear facilities. The selection of the location was crucial. The device needed to be positioned at a vantage point that offered both proximity to the Tibetan plateau and an unobstructed view. After careful consideration, the team settled on Nanda Devi. Standing at a staggering height of 25,643 feet, 7,816 meters, the mountain provided an ideal surveillance position. This covert mission was dubbed Operation Hat. The device. The nuclear-powered surveillance equipment was no ordinary piece of machinery. Weighing 56 kilograms, it contained plutonium, half the amount used in the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The complete installation would include an 8 to 10-foot antenna, 2 transceiver sets, and a power generator. The plutonium was meant to serve as a long-term power source for the device, ensuring it could operate autonomously in the harsh mountain environment. Assembling the team. For such a challenging mission, only the best mountaineers would do. The CIA and IB turned to Captain M.S. Kohli, a legendary Indian climber who had already made history. Kohli had led the successful Indian Everest expedition in 1965, during which 9 team members reached the summit, a world record that would stand unbroken for 17 years. The expedition team was carefully assembled, combining American and Indian expertise. The American contingent included renowned climbers Dr. Robert Schaller and Jim McCarthy. The Indian side brought in accomplished mountaineers like Sonam Wangyal and Gurcharan Singh Bangu, all veterans of the successful 1965 Everest expedition. For their services, the climbers were handsomely compensated. The Americans were paid $1,000 per month, equivalent to approximately 9 million rupees in today's value, accounting for inflation. However, the team members weren't fully briefed on the mission's true nature. Captain Kohli later revealed in interviews that they were simply told they needed to place a device on Nanda Devi's peak, with little additional information provided. The first attempt, October 1965. In October 1965, the team embarked on their secret mission. 10 Indian and American climbers began their ascent, carrying the heavy surveillance equipment along with their normal climbing gear. The route up Nanda Devi, known as the Stairway to Heaven, proved to be a formidable challenge. The team faced multiple obstacles. The thin air at high altitude made breathing difficult, and the weight of the 56-kilogram device complicated every step. As they climbed higher, they battled fierce winds and dropping temperatures. Captain Kohli, prioritizing his team's safety above all else, carefully monitored the deteriorating conditions. As they neared the summit, nature intervened with devastating effect. A severe snowstorm descended upon the mountain, making further progress impossible. Faced with life-threatening conditions, the team made the difficult decision to secure the device in a small cave-like formation, anchoring it firmly to the rock face. They marked the location and began their descent, planning to return when conditions improved. The disappearance. When the team returned the following year, they made a shocking discovery. The device was gone. The news sent both the CIA and IB into a panic. The implications were serious. Somewhere on or around Nanda Devi was a nuclear-powered device containing highly radioactive plutonium. The search efforts were extensive. In 1968, 2 specially modified helicopters capable of flying at altitudes up to 23,000 feet were brought in to aid in the search. Despite numerous expeditions and extensive searching, the device was never found. The second device, learning from their first attempt, the CIA and IB didn't give up. In 1967, they successfully installed a second monitoring device on nearby Nanda Devi at an altitude of about 22,000 feet. This device effectively served its purpose, confirming that China had not yet developed long-range nuclear capabilities. The aftermath and ongoing concerns. The missing device became a source of international concern when the story broke in 1978 through the Washington Post. Under mounting pressure, then Prime Minister Morarji Desai addressed Parliament, acknowledging the mission's existence and its failure. The environmental implications remain worrying. The plutonium used in the device has a half-life of over 24,000 years. If the device degraded and the plutonium leaked into the glacier-fed river systems of the region, it could potentially affect the water supply of millions of people living along the Ganges River system. Recent events have reignited concerns about the missing device. In February 2021, a devastating flood in Chamoli district of Uttarakhand led to speculation about whether the long-lost nuclear device might have played a role. The flood resulted in over 200 missing persons and claimed numerous lives. While no definitive connection has been established, some experts, including Captain Kohli himself, have suggested that the radioactive plutonium buried in the ice might have contributed to the glacier's instability. The legacy. The Nanda Devi incident has captured public imagination and inspired numerous stories and potential adaptations. Filmmaker Scott Rosenberg, known for movies like Con Air and Gone in 60 Seconds, has announced plans for a film based on the mission, with Ranbir Kapoor slated to play Captain Kohli. The mystery has also led to various theories about the device's fate. Some suggested it was captured by Pakistan, while others believed it was simply misplaced by the Indian team. Both theories have been discredited, but the truth remains elusive. The mission had far-reaching implications for Indo-American relations and highlighted the complex nature of Cold War espionage. It demonstrated both the lengths to which nations would go to gather intelligence and the potential environmental risks of such operations. Current status. Today, more than 5 decades later, the device's location remains one of the Cold War's most intriguing mysteries. The glaciers of Nanda Devi continue to hold their secret, while environmental scientists monitor the region for any signs of radioactive contamination. The story of Operation Hat serves as a reminder of the Cold War's global reach and the sometimes dangerous lengths nations would go to maintain strategic advantages. It also raises important questions about the environmental costs of intelligence operations and the long-term consequences of using nuclear materials in sensitive ecological zones. As climate change affects the Himalayan glaciers, there's growing concern that the device, if still intact, could be exposed or could contaminate water sources. The mystery of Nanda Devi remains not just a historical curiosity, but a potential environmental concern for future generations. This remarkable story continues to fascinate historians, environmentalists, and the public, combining elements of Cold War espionage, mountaineering adventure, and environmental concern. While the device may never be found, its legacy lives on in the shadows of the majestic Nanda Devi, a reminder of a time when the heights of the Himalayas became an unlikely battlefield in the global Cold War. Now, we will talk about the what-if scenario. If this device gets leaked on Nanda Devi Mountain, then what will be its consequences? Part 1. The Discovery. March 2026, Lada Village, Uttarakhand. Dr. Arunima Singh stood at her makeshift laboratory in Lada village, staring at the test results with trembling hands. After decades of speculation, they had finally found evidence of what everyone had feared. Radiation levels in the Rishiganga River were rising at an alarming rate. "Dr. Miller, you need to see this," she called to her American colleague. The aging nuclear physicist had flown in from Los Alamos at the first signs of anomalous readings. Together, they had been monitoring the glacial melt from Nanda Devi, knowing that somewhere in that magnificent mountain lay a deadly Cold War relic, a nuclear-powered surveillance device lost in 1965. "The spring thaw," Miller muttered, examining the data. "Global warming has accelerated the glacial melt. The device must have finally emerged from its icy tomb." Part 2. The First Signs. June 2026. Joshimath, Uttarakhand Mahesh Rawat, a local farmer, noticed at first in his apple orchards. The trees that had been in his family for generations were producing strange, misshapen fruit. His neighbors reported similar observations: withering crops, declining livestock health, and an unusual number of bird carcasses near the riverbanks. The local hospital began recording an uptick in unusual symptoms among villagers. Dr. Priya Mathur, the chief medical officer, documented cases of severe headaches, unexplained fatigue, and a disturbing number of respiratory problems. She remembered the old stories about the lost nuclear device and felt a chill run down her spine. Part 3. The Crisis Unfolds. September 2026, New Delhi. The Prime Minister's office was in chaos. International media had picked up the story, and satellite images showed a growing dead zone around the glacier. The radiation was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, carried by wind and water through the intricate river systems of northern India. "The Ganges is showing traces of contamination," the Environment Minister reported grimly. "We're looking at a potential disaster affecting millions of people across multiple states." Emergency meetings were held with American officials who acknowledged their historical role in the situation. Joint task forces were formed, but everyone knew they were racing against time. Part 4. The Human Cost. December 2026. Varanasi. The holy city of Varanasi, which had thrived on the banks of the Ganges for millennia, was transforming. The Ghats, usually teeming with pilgrims and tourists, stood eerily empty. Warning signs about contaminated water lined the riverbank. The economic impact was devastating. Tourism had plummeted, and centuries-old traditions were being abandoned out of necessity. Amit Sharma, a local boatman whose family had worked on the Ganges for generations, watched as environmental scientists in protective gear collected water samples. "The river is sacred to us," he said quietly. "How do we heal something that has always been our healer?" Part 5. International Response. March 2027, Geneva. The United Nations Environmental Summit convened an emergency session. The situation had evolved into an international crisis. Nepal and Bangladesh reported contamination in their water systems, and there were concerns about long-term effects on the entire South Asian ecosystem. Dr. Singh presented her findings to the Assembly. The plutonium contamination is spreading through multiple vectors: water, soil, and air. The high-altitude winds are carrying radioactive particles across borders. This isn't just India's problem anymore. Part 6. The Breaking Point. July 2027, Rishikesh. The summer monsoon brought new horrors. Heavy rains accelerated the spread of contamination, and flash floods carried radioactive debris downstream. Evacuation orders were issued for communities along the river system. In Rishikesh, the once bustling yoga capital of the world, ashrams stood empty. International students had fled, and local businesses were shuttering. The ancient city was becoming a ghost town, its sacred connection to the Ganges now a source of danger rather than salvation. Part 7. Hope and Adaptation. January 2028, multiple locations. Innovation born of necessity began to emerge. Indian and international scientists developed new water filtration systems. Traditional farmers adapted to greenhouse farming with imported soil. Communities relocated to safer areas, carrying their cultural heritage with them. In Lada village, Dr. Singh worked with local youth to establish a network of monitoring stations. "We can't undo what's happened," she told them, "but we can learn from it and protect future generations." Part 8. The New Normal. December 2028, Uttarakhand life adapted to the changed reality. New settlements sprung up away from contaminated zones. Alternative water sources were developed, and ancient traditions were modified to protect public health while preserving cultural identity. The government established the Nanda Devi Radiation Research Center, dedicated to studying long-term effects and developing mitigation strategies. International cooperation strengthened as countries realized that environmental disasters knew no borders. Epilogue. 2030. Nanda Devi National Park. The mountain stood as it had for millions of years, its peak still reaching toward the heavens. But it was different now. A restricted zone, a reminder of humanity's capacity to affect nature in ways that span generations. A new generation of environmental scientists, led by students mentored by Dr. Singh, continued to monitor and study the affected areas. They worked to ensure that the lessons of Nanda Devi would never be forgotten, that the choices of one era could echo through the lives of countless future generations. The story of Nanda Devi evolved from a Cold War mystery into a cautionary tale about nuclear materials, environmental responsibility, and the interconnectedness of all life on Earth. The mountain's legacy now served as both a warning and a catalyst for change, as humanity grappled with the long-term consequences of its actions in an increasingly fragile world.